Hello everyone, I'm Munro and I'm a UK-based photographer from South Wales. The type of photography I shoot is storytelling photography, and I'm here today with Wex at a location in London to bring to you the Journeyman. My photography journey started in 2008 when I bought my first camera for a trekking trip to the Himalayas and Nepal, and since returning I was smitten by the whole photography idea, and combining that with a fascination for old things and old buildings, grand buildings, I decided to embark on a photography sort of journey where I could place myself within the pictures as the Journeyman character. The Journeyman himself is a character that tries to provoke emotions and feelings to the viewer. What I want from my photography is I want the viewer to wonder who he is, where has he been, where does he going, and surrounding him are buildings of grand design that were once perhaps key to our heritage and industry that are now sort of sadly faded by the wayside. So it's a kind of snapshot of time, if you like, between sort of old and new. And yeah, telling stories, that's the type of photography that I like to do the most. So, as much as I'd like to tell you that I have 3 camera bodies, 5 lenses and a variety of filters, I will disappoint you by going through some of my kit that I use on location. I'll start with my old trusty Munro tripod. The reason for this tripod actually is, again, there's not much difference in the weight between this aluminium tripod and the Munro version of the carbon fibre one. And what this does, this gives me extra stability. It's very solid, and on top I have the G3 ball head. My reason for using a ball head as opposed to any other sort of tilt and pan is again down to portability and how it collapses down, so I don't have any arms sticking out all over the place. But it's a top sturdy tripod, and that's important to me, especially with some of the locations that we go into. I want it to be sturdy, and on the bottom there are rubberized feet, so you can imagine the locations being sort of quite wet and dank, if you like, so it's important to get a solid footing on the tripod. Next, I would like again to tell you that I have a rather expensive rucksack or a pelly case or something rather nice, but it's a circa 1973 retro duffel bag. Again, it's because I'm not precious about throwing this bag around and getting stains and marks on it, and it's a proper workhorse. It does the trick. Again, it's small and compact, and I can just sling it on my shoulder when I'm getting into these locations. The most precious thing is inside, and that is the camera that I use on location, which is a Sony A7R IV. It's mounted on a small rig L bracket, and that in turn sits into the Munro tripod very quickly with a quick release plate. On the front, I have the G series lens, the 24-105. My reason for this lens is because I'm guaranteed to get the shot I want because of the range, 24-105. And the other thing is, in the conditions that I am shooting, sometimes it can be wet, dusty, dirty. The last thing I want to be doing is changing lenses, going with primes, that kind of stuff, so that I know I have it covered. Lastly, the Sony A7R IV has auto eye tracking, and when it can't quite pick up the eye, if you're a figure within a shot, it'll go straight to the head and you're guaranteed pin sharp images because it locks on. And that's very important when you're shooting on your own or with a sort of remote release. You're guaranteed to get locked on to the shot. So that's my reason for you using the Sony, and this lens covers the full range. So now you've seen what's inside my kit bag and the type of stuff I use, we'll get shooting now, and you'll see the introduction of the Journeyman and his props and everything else that comes with it. So the Journeyman as a character has taken me to many different places. We're talking Chernobyl in the Ukraine, we're talking Belgium, we're talking France, Luxembourg, and anywhere really that I can get inspiration from these grand buildings. What I tend to do is I tend to use obviously the internet to research these places and try and find certain urbex sites where these old grand buildings are. With that, there's usually ways of approaching owners or approaching people that sort of are in charge of these buildings, and it's always good to get a sort of permission visit, if you like. I need an assistant, I need a friend, and that usually comes in the form of Gez, my friend, who accompanies me to these locations where we can lift, gather all our cases and belongings and get ourselves into these locations and primed ready for the shoot. And other than that, there are safety issues that it's never really a good idea to be at these locations alone, so it's always good advice to have somebody with you. So, composition decided, we found the shot, we've got our main key light, the large window, but this corner is a little bit ghastly. And so we're going to dress the set now with some old apple crates and try and cover up some of that pipe work. Voila, as if by magic, the apple crates have just sat very nicely in the corner, taking away that pipe work. So yeah, I didn't really want anything too uniform, if you like. I wanted it a little bit skew-if, almost as like they weren't placed there, but just thrown in the corner, just disregarded, because after all, we are trying to tell a story of a disused building and stuff that has been neglected over years. So a couple of them are a little bit broken, but they've done the trick just fine. Most of these locations that we're at usually rely on a lot of natural light, big light sources. So I'm looking for large windows, doors, anything that's going to provide me with a rather large key light, if you like. And I rely a lot on shooting natural light. One of the things that I do like to consider when I'm on location is, what will I be doing afterwards in post-processing? So my composition has to be A, spot on, and B, with the least amount of items within the shot that could potentially be damaging to the composition. I usually try to get as much as I can done in camera, if you like, and my post-processing is minimal, with obviously some color corrections, bits of sharpening, but apart from that, it's minimum. There may be a chance of small bits of cloning, but I try to get as much as I can done in camera. What I don't particularly like at the moment is the fact that my viewpoint is I can see the pipe work coming out of the top of your head. So from a composition point of view, it doesn't sit quite right. And also the seam, the crease in the wall where both adjoining walls meet. So I'm anticipating that I will have to either stand a foot closer to the window, potentially, sort of like that. That might work, but I would say probably back onto the better wall. I think so. I think that's going to be pretty much there. Okay, right, the first problem up is the exposure. I'm going to need to dial in my settings and potentially take two shots, one for the correct exposure of the window and one for the correct exposure of the scene. That'll be the minimum amount of post-processing I'll do. But as you can see from this picture, I've got the scene exposed correctly, but the window is blown out. So that being the main key light, obviously I want it in, but I'm gonna have to take another exposed picture for it. So by changing my settings, this picture is exposed correctly for the scene, for the window outside and the scene outside. So it'll just be a case of flipping back and forth those two images and combining them to produce one correctly exposed picture. Final settings for the shot would be for the inside, for the journeyman himself and the scene inside, 1/40th of a second, so relatively low, and f8 with the ISO set at 400, and then I just expose separately them for the window. We're good to go. Okay, I think I'm relatively happy with the setup. The question is now, how will it work in terms of my relationship to the corner of this wall and what we see in terms of the pipe work and how much available light that we have. So the only thing that's left to do now, I think, is to morph into the journeyman. So let's go and get changed. Early 2016, I decided to get myself a studio where I could carry on and progress my works. My main reason for this was the fact that these locations are becoming far more rare and far more scarce in terms of getting to them, getting permission to visit them, and bringing the stories to you as the viewer. So the studio for me has given me control over light, number one, and also it allows me to be creative and build mini sets to create the story as if I am at one of the locations. So that's the way I would say the Journeyman has progressed from early 2016 to the present day. And since then we've been creating sets and stories within the studio, and I know that I'm guaranteed to get the right settings, the right conditions, and deliver the picture that I want. A huge thank you to Wex for getting me involved in this today. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And don't forget, use the Wex hashtag WexHowTo to showcase your work and your creativity. And also, don't forget, drop any comments in below and I'll get back to you and answer them. You can see more of my work on my website and obviously on social media and YouTube, where my YouTube name is Ian Munro Art.